Okay, so we've all heard of the Forbes 30 under 30 list, right? It's supposed to be the roster of the brightest young minds out there. But lately, something weird has been happening. That super prestigious award, it's starting to feel more like, I don't know, a modern-day curse.
And I'm not just being dramatic. You've probably seen this joke floating around online. It's kind of dark, but it points to a very real and pretty wild trend. A shocking number of these celebrated entrepreneurs are trading their fancy corner offices for, well, jail cells.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How does a list that's supposed to signal genius turn into a who's who of future federal inmates? It's a crazy paradox. We're going to dive in and try to figure out exactly how this keeps happening.
All right, to really get a grip on this so-called curse, you got to look at the individual stories. I mean, we all know the big ones, right? Sam Bankman-Fried, Charlie Javis. But get this. Just as the latest list was coming out, another name got added to this, let's call it, infamous club. And her story? It's the perfect case study for what we're talking about. So let me introduce you to Gözde Güven. At only 26 years old, she's the CEO of a fintech startup called Calder. She had it all, the Forbes nod, a ton of funding, what looked like a brilliant idea, and now she's staring down charges that could put her away for more than 50 years. I mean, wow!
Okay, so how on earth did it all fall apart so spectacularly? To really understand the fraud here, we first have to look at the company she built. Or, the company she pretended to build. This is a textbook example of using all the right buzzwords and hype to create this perfect, shiny illusion of success.
And you have to admit, on paper, Calder's pitch sounded amazing. They called it a Shopify-like platform. The idea was that any brand could use it to launch their own loyalty program powered by blockchain. I mean, come on, it hit all the right notes, all the hot keywords, and you better believe investors were paying attention.
The core idea was actually pretty simple, but really powerful. You know how loyalty programs are usually just a giant cost for companies? Well, Calder promised to totally flip that on its head. They said they'd provide the tech for brands to launch programs that would make them money, not just cost them money. It sounded like the next big thing, a total fintech giant in the making.
And boy, did that pitch work. It worked incredibly well. Güven managed to secure a whopping $10.5 million in funding. And look, that's not just cash in the bank. That's validation. It was the stamp of approval that made Calder look totally legit to the entire tech industry.
But you know how it goes. When you have that much money and that much hype floating around, scrutiny is going to follow. And once federal investigators started, let's say, performing an autopsy on Calder's books, that shiny illusion started to crack, and what they found underneath was pretty rotten.
So here's the bombshell. Prosecutors allege that Güven was keeping two completely separate sets of books. Yep, two. For investors, she was painting this beautiful picture of $1.2 million in annual recurring revenue. But the reality? The actual revenue? Less than 10 grand. This wasn't just stretching the truth. It was a complete and total fabrication.
Just look at this. The difference is absolutely insane. What she claimed in revenue versus what was actually coming in. That gap isn't just a gap, it's a canyon. You could drive a fleet of trucks through it. And that right there, that's the heart of the fraud.
But oh, it gets worse. The deception didn't just stop with the company's finances. She's also accused of using these same fake numbers to get herself an O1 visa. You know, the one for people with extraordinary ability. And to pull that off, they say she digitally forged the signatures of big-name executives on her support letters. And that's exactly why the charges snowballed into aggravated identity theft and wire fraud.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. Because this isn't just a story about one founder making some really, really bad choices. The Gözde Güven case, it's like a symptom of a much bigger problem in the whole startup ecosystem. It really makes you wonder, what is going on in the system that lets these kinds of massive frauds happen over and over again?
You can almost think of it like a perfect recipe for fraud, right? First, you've got this gold rush mentality around AI and blockchain, where investors have so much FOMO, fear of missing out, that they throw money at things before really checking them out. Then you sprinkle in prestigious awards like the Forbes list, which basically get used as a shortcut to trust. And you bake all of that in a culture that screams, fake it till you make it, where that mindset can slide from just being ambitious into committing actual crimes.
And this quote from the U.S. Attorney's Office, it really hits hard. It totally reframes the whole conversation. They're saying, hey, this isn't just about some ambitious kid pushing the envelope a little too far.
No. Law enforcement is now seeing a clear pattern here. They're seeing criminal fraud that's been deliberately dressed up to look like the next big tech breakthrough.
So, where does that leave us? What's the big takeaway from the Calder story and this whole 30 under 30 curse thing? What does it mean for founders, for investors, and honestly, for how we all think about success?
When you really boil it down, the curse seems to come from one place. This insane, almost toxic pressure to achieve some kind of world-changing, massive success before you turn 30. And when you're in that kind of pressure cooker, it can really mess with your head. It pushes founders to believe that faking success is the only path to actually making it. And all of this leaves us with one last big question. As we see more and more of these cases pop up, you just have to ask, is the Forbes 30 under 30 list still a mark of genius, or has it accidentally become a giant red flag? A warning sign telling investors to maybe look a little closer, dig a little deeper, or maybe even just run in the other direction.